Okay.
Thank you all. I've just got probably a short video to start with, and then I'm going to move into some trends that we're seeing in the industry, and then follow up with a panel discussion. So thank you all for attending the session.
When a brand thinks about allocating its ad spend, it used to be TV, print, maybe some money on AdWords, maybe some money on Facebook. Over the period of the last 10 years, a lot more has shifted towards the channels that can be measured. CitrusAd is at its core a retail media platform that retailers now use for serving all different types of content, including display ads, responsive banner ads, video ads, branded pages, email ads, in-store screens.
They need a platform like ours or technology like ours to be able to compete with the Googles and Amazons and bring some of those digital advertising dollars back into their business.
We work with a plethora of huge retailers. Sainsbury's in the UK, Argos. We work with both Coles and Woolworths here locally. And we work with major retailers in the US like Macy's and Groupon. One of the prohibitors to getting into a relationship with a tech partner is how heavy the integration is. And so one of the things that we do offer is a quick integration.
We could not walk into a retailer and it'd be a long process. They've got busy roadmaps, but we've had retailers get up and running in 4 weeks.
Provides them with a low barrier to entry, test the waters, see if it's right for them, without investing millions or months and months of technology into a platform. We believe our retail media solution needs to be good for the retailer, the supplier, and the consumer. And how we achieve that is by providing personalized ads. We provide an income stream to the retailer, and doing so in a personalized way means that they don't have to compromise user experience. And then for the supplier, they get to access customers right at the point of purchase.
The influence and the power of the online shelf space is very far reaching, and the industry is starting to understand that in retail media.
Brands can log in, create a campaign. Within a few clicks, they've selected their products, their budget, which products they want to target, which search terms they want to target. Within 30 seconds, they could be live on the Sainsbury's.com website.
You know, that crystal clear reporting coming back to them in real time, they've never had from retailers before. So they're seeing if they spend $50,000, they know exactly how many clicks, how many impressions, what was my click-through rate, how many units did I sell, what was the value in that, and what is my return of ad spend. Game-changing in some industries in retail.
Brands are really looking for that level of reporting so they can justify the spend that they're putting into advertising has a direct return.
I've even had brands say to me, you know, we've been crying out for this platform for years.
We're now globally recognized as one of the leading platforms, if not the leading platform. We want to stay there. We got there because of our innovation and continually listening to retailers, understanding what they want, understanding what the brands want, being nimble, being flexible, being good to work with, and really going on a journey with retailers.
So what I wanted to do is just take you through, I suppose, some of the digital retail media growth and trends that we're seeing globally from both a retailer perspective, but also from a brand and a CPG and advertiser perspective as well. Brands in the US spent nearly $30 billion in 2021 on retail media. And that, believe it or not, is a $25 billion increase on 2020's number. Now, what we're seeing is that this is not attributed to kind of COVID or anything like that, because actually the numbers in 2022 are even growing much larger as well. So the brands are wanting to see how they can actually influence the customer at the digital point of sale, okay, and influence the entire end-to-end life cycle of that purchase. So what we're also seeing is that the size of the CPG ad spend, okay, is not growing, but the proportion of retail media inside that wallet actually is, okay, and this is pretty interesting. As we get into the panel discussion, we'll be discussing around some of these points as well. US retail media advertising is expected to reach nearly 41 billion this year, okay, and then it'll probably grow another 10 billion in 2023 to surpass $50 billion, okay, which is a pretty big jump from the number in 2019, okay, and what we're seeing is that digital retail media or e-commerce media is actually contributing the largest proportion, closely followed by connected TV and other formats like podcast advertising, etc. as well. But what's the real big statistic here? Okay, is that in 2023, 1 in 5 digital ad dollars will be attributed to retail media or e-commerce media. And we're seeing this now where retail media is actually evolving from performance ads to brand building campaigns. So we're actually seeing this across some of the established players like Sainsbury's or Tesco in the UK or Woolworths in Australia. And these retailers are actually starting to kind of build retail media networks that ultimately challenge the upper funnel awareness driving formats, like digital display, banners, video content, etc. like that. And then several of these, say Macy's or Lowe's or Target in the US, are actually have their own DSPs, or they partner with other DSPs to drive demand downstream as well. And so why is digital retail media or e-commerce media so important? It's because it's sales media. So you can basically leverage the shopper mindset. You can leverage the share of voice at point of sale. It's not impacted by a post-cookie deprecation or a post-cookie world. It delivers at scale, and it's ultimate brand safety for the advertiser and the brand. And so what we're seeing is that 50 to 60% of online clicks typically result in an in-store sale within 4 days. So this is around what we'll talk about in the panel discussion as well, which this is around really, omni-channel, multi-channel, cross-channel attribution. So I just want to take everybody through, before we get into the panel discussion, just what our vision, I suppose, of the future is, okay, at CitrusAd. And you saw a brief introduction of what CitrusAd does in that video. Okay, but as we start to kind of move along, leading retail transformation journeys, we're trying to connect through a unified on-site, off-site, and in-store retail media platform, be at the center of all of these intersections. Okay, using our sister company Epsilon, okay, how do we actually connect all of the channels together to provide both the advertiser and the retailer a completely connected, unified experience across retail media? And we do this by stitching together all the different channel and media mixes together to provide one unified user interface across offsite, in-store, and online. Okay, and all of this is through one self-service platform, a common customer identity, cross-channel engagement, real-time unified reporting and attribution. And so basically what this enables is expanded reach and monetization for not only the retailer but the advertiser as well, through unified targeting and measurement. And we'll also touch on this in the panel discussion around kind of what we're seeing as being the important measurement for an advertiser as well. So I suppose welcome to the retail media revolution, and now I'll invite our other panelists on stage as well. Thank you.
2020.
So if it's okay with you, Adam, shall I quickly invite our panelists? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and now it's time to deep dive into our panel discussions. So if I'd please invite Vadarajan Raghunathan, who is the Head of Monetization and Customer Engagement, Big Basket. I'd also like to invite Dr. Kushal Sangvi, Head India and Southeast Asia, Citrus Ad, and Anushri Ghosh, who's the Lead Digital Strategy E-Commerce D2C at ITC Limited.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today. It's been an interesting day all around, and I think some of the topics that we're about to discuss are pretty cutting edge and bleeding edge in the retail media area. So I suppose in recent times we've seen kind of like ad inventory fragmentation and the need for like sell-side ad infrastructure as buyers and advertisers start to kind of manage spend across multiple marketplaces. So I'll probably cut to kind of all three of the panelists here in terms of, you know, what are you seeing in terms of some of the solutions that you're seeing in your area of how advertisers or retailers are trying to solve this, solve this fragmentation.
I think really the fragmentation sort of. More than fragmentation, I think one of the key shifts, and Anushri probably can add to this as we go along, advertisers like ITC are now starting to sort of look at how they can maximize their performance advertising, especially on horizontal marketplaces. Let's say cut to 5 years back. What used to happen was e-commerce was sort of treated as a nice to have media, right? Now I think there's a fundamental sort of shift where the funnel has been inverted, where folks are saying, hey, let me try and max out as much of the retail media landscape as possible. So give us more inventory is often the pushback that we get. It's never that, hey, we're not satisfied with the ROI. It's not sort of, we're not happy with the, be worried about ad frauds on your platform or what have you, right? To that extent, this is sort of like a mirror image of the problems that everyone sort of spoke about in the morning, right? And our challenge, right, as a horizontal marketplace is really to sort of move beyond ads. So if you're, for example, looking for, let's say, Oreos, right? Can I sort of contextualize it in a manner that appeals to you? Can I say, hey, this is the fastest moving version of Oreos, or I suspect Brisbane, where you're from, I'm probably going to say, hey, this is the fastest moving in Brisbane, right? Or say, hey, this has got 700 plus 4-star plus ratings, right? Or say, hey, your friends are buying Oreos. Why wouldn't you buy them as well, right? So I would probably imagine, at least on retail media, the problem isn't one of fragmentation. It's one of thoughtfully liberating supply and improved contextualization.
So I think I'll add to, I think you pretty much kind of covered a whole lot of things. But in terms of being an advertiser, and one advertises typically, and I think it's shifted quite a bit in the last 5 to 6 years, when you've become really, really outcome driven. And let's keep this as a fact that e-commerce channels today, they are actually audience hubs in their own right. So which essentially means that you can influence users through the funnel. So essentially moving consumers from, say, objectives which are typically the objectives that a CPG brand would advertise for, which is awareness. If you are able to kind of influence them forward in the decision-making funnel with the right kind of placement of inventory, which is contextually placed, which is probably intuitive when it comes to the consumer journey that the consumer is following, I think it makes more sense to kind of invest in dollars which can then be attributed towards outcomes which can be really measured. So I think that's probably just the starting point of this conversation. And I think Varda touched upon this, the fact that, e-commerce today is essentially not good to have when it comes to advertising. It's, legitimately a part of the full funnel advertising, or full funnel comms space that any marketer would today talk about. So I think that's where we are at. It is an evolving, situation. We've not really reached probably the destination yet, but there are many possibilities which are emerging. It's an interplay between the search and the browse journeys that the consumers follow. If platforms are able to interplay between content, ratings and reviews, media inventory, all of it put together, which can then influence what's happening when it comes to margins and promos and discounts that you give. I think it completes the circle in a manner of speaking, so to speak, right?
If I could just add to that, I think what it really is solving for is, I think, a mixture of spaces that we've grown up in the digital world with. So we began with search, we went to display, we went to social, and pretty much all that. And I think the pillars that digital is built on is now, I think, all coming together within e-commerce, right? So you've got search, you've got display, and you've got social commerce, and all of that. And imagine that being available to brands. And I think the beauty and the best part of it is all of us have been marketers at some point, is the whole real-time element of at your fingertips, getting data, getting insights, and then optimizing for that in terms of making sure that just in the next 5 minutes, better ways to sort of communicate the same messaging. So that's the best part of what I think is going to be the changing landscape of e-commerce advertising.
Yeah, I agree. I think where we're going is like what's important to kind of like retailers and advertisers is this ability to kind of have the cross-channel or multi-channel or omni-channel or whatever channel we want to call it, attribution and measurement. So I suppose in that context, probably from an advertiser and a CPG perspective, is ROAS still the primary most important measurement, or are we seeing this move into kind of other areas?
Well, it to a large extent still is. Return on ad spends or advertising cost of sale is a very important metric, but I think it's becoming a little more holistic in a sense that the TAC cost, which is the total advertising cost of sale, which essentially is like I said, an interplay of multiple elements, which then is more outcome driven, and then you are able to kind of figure out, because the sales essentially are there are larger outcomes that you are able to kind of witness because of an interplay of multiple interventions that you make. Then it starts making much more sense. The attribution starts to look much more cleaner. It is not just one campaign deep, or it is not just one tactical intervention deep. So I think one more holistic way of looking at things would be the way to go. But that being said, I think it's still a little bit of a black box, to be honest, in terms of, and I'm speaking for advertisers, is the fact that attribution is still based on a lot of indexed numbers, as we call it. It is still based on a lot of hypotheses that you would probably use a plethora of technologies to then arrive at what's working and what's not. And also digital at large and e-commerce specifically, they are channels for it's probably rooted in user experience. So interruption in the form of advertising might just kind of throw away users. So it has to be a really intuitive mix between what the consumer is looking for, and that's where the contextuality and relevance piece kind of comes in. So I think if it kind of fits in both the need states really well, you add value to a consumer's life. At the same time, you also enable brands to reach out to consumers in the most meaningful manner. I think that's where probably there will be meeting of minds between advertisers and publishers or e-com channels.
Just to sort of add to that, right? I just want to throw out a bunch of numbers. The average cost of acquisition of a customer for most e-commerce marketplaces is anywhere between 1,500 to 5,000 bucks, right? So, where I'm sort of going with this is, what we'd like to believe is that once a customer comes in, and usually customers come in because they're getting a price off, they're getting a great value. Customers come in for a price discount, they stay on because of the quality, and then they expand their shopping funnel because of the range. It's sort of a good mental model that succinctly sums up how e-commerce is. But today we're probably in the second phase where customers who come in for value / price offs are now exploring further and further. They're starting to explore further and further, right? And that's, I think, one of the things that I don't think e-commerce media as yet have fully solved for. If I were to, for example, show an ad of Dove, for example, to Anushri, right, and after 3 months she ends up buying, let's say, a Dove shampoo, whereas the advertisement was actually for a Dove soap, right? How do I, how do I sort of factor in that halo into the equation, right? And I think it's sort of proven that improved discovery at the point of sale, which is why in all of your modern trade counters you have these Wrigley's and chocolates and all of that stuff, right? And that essentially drives a lot of brand value. And a lot of these brands, right, right from your chewing gums to chocolates or what they are, simply because they're there exactly at the impulse point of purchase, right? Is that, do you want to sort of strictly define that as a performance money or as a brand money? The truth is, the answer lies somewhere in between. But I think we haven't, as an industry, e-commerce industry hasn't still been able to figure out how do we start attributing improved brand lift, right, to these instances. Like, for example, at this point of time, given the data that we have, I'd like for ourselves to go back to Anushri and say, hey, there's someone who's seen this advertisement of Sunfeast 3 times, right? Because he's seen it 3 times, he's likely to purchase Sunfeast 30% more than a user who's not seen this, right? The issue is that, one, we aren't quite sort of capturing that data in that texture. 2, I think the data itself hasn't quite attained critical mass, right? So there's a sort of natural evolution where once you start shopping over many, many months and many, many quarters, you have a lot more data. And I can go back confidently and say, this is how the long-term sort of trend line looks like. Right now, what we have, and especially given what's happened in the last couple of years, is a series of blips. We have these huge highs, then a little bit of dip, then another high, and then it goes back. So we aren't quite able to draw the long-term trend line, but I suspect we'll get there in another year or so.
Pandemic, I think, shifted, change everywhere as well and here as well. But I think while this is becoming an important subject here, and when I speak to some of my sort of global counterparts, and I'm almost amazed when they actually mention the fact that I think sometimes brands are sort of bidding and paying 3 times the price of the product being sold for the ad. Now that's something new for the industry, right? Imagine a shampoo which costs 300 rupees, but you're going to spend twice that money on getting the advertising out for that, which means there is a certain correlation of costs as what we would always call a long-term sort of view of the customer lifetime value. So I think e-commerce is also playing for the lifetime value as well. So I think advertisers have begun to realize the importance of that every single granular data, and they've begun to shift those dollars. I'm happy at the AdTech next year to understand really sort of whether even in India, are the advertisers going to pay the same way they would pay in the US, Europe, and others as well.
It's interesting, like, the trends that we're seeing in other in the US market, particularly, like, I'll give you an example that we were talking about just over lunch before, which is, like Duracell and Energizer batteries, okay, who are, and Kushal gave the example there of 3 times, but we're seeing in some markets where it's like up to 10 times, okay, just to get on the page, okay, and because they're trying to kind of maintain that contextual relevancy, okay, and get in front of the consumer, okay, at their time of emotional purchase, okay. So the parent buying a toy for their kid, okay, and they need the batteries to go in the toy, and they're paying $4 to $5 CPC for a $1 battery, like it's and so we're seeing this dynamic shift, okay, and so I suppose in a post-pandemic world, or whatever period that we're in at the moment, it seems to change every 5 seconds. In a post-pandemic world, do we see this trend continuing? Okay, in terms of from an advertiser perspective, but also from a retailer perspective, where the proportion of e-commerce or digital retail media is still starting to dominate the advertisers' I suppose share of spend.
So the media landscape actually witnessed quite a bit of a shift, and we've seen OTTs emerge as huge islands of reach, as did e-commerce. While there was a correction that would have happened post the second wave or so, there was correction when it comes to e-commerce as well. But it has really caused a little bit of an irreversible habit change, if you may call it. So there have been newer set of audiences that have entered uh, you know, um, the users or the user base of e-commerce at large, be it in any form. During that time, e-grocery became really big, marketplaces became really big. A lot of modern trade outlets actually kind of pivoted into becoming omni-channel outlets, which omni-channel solutions, so to speak. So I think there were proximity essentially was the key, and which caused a lot of hand holding or a little bit of leapfrogging from a consumer's end as well to kind of adopt e-commerce at large. So while the media mix had become skewed towards digital and e-commerce quite a bit, like I said, media essentially is mostly planned to be where the consumer is. So there hasn't been any reversal, so to speak, and e-commerce has maintained in its share in terms of the share of wallet when it comes to media to a large extent. Although it's not a monolith, it differs from categories to categories. But there has been an emergence of e-com first brands, even in the CPG space. So I think that way there has been a lot of interest or a lot of movement towards or a focus towards really decoding this new thing called e-commerce from a media perspective. Earlier, you would actually treat it as a probably a touch point which would drive sales for you. But now with becoming like an audience hub, which actually is sitting on a lot of intent data when it comes to consumers. I think it kind of takes away the risk of wasting impressions, if I may say that, and you are able to kind of reach out to a little more in-market audiences, even for CPG. So I think that's where the relevance from a media perspective stays when it comes to e-commerce.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that from a supply perspective, I think most of you would probably be able to relate to it. A couple of years back, if you ordered something on e-commerce, it probably reached you in a day, couple of days, right? Now, if you order at 10, it'll probably reach you if you live in a major city, by lunchtime. I think we're talking about 10 minutes delivery, right? And I think for a lot of you, this may still sort of be an eye opener, but we're now getting to a stage where we can deliver impulse purchases, right? Chocolates, ice creams, right? Frozen foods, etc., within the hour, right? What that does is it opens up a whole realm of possibilities from a consumer's perspective. So the consumer sort of is thinking about purchases in a mothership plus a satellite sort of model, right? He or she is thinking of rice, pulses, eggs, etc., once a day, twice a week, what have you, and then you have these cravings, stuff that you need within the hour. Right now, we're getting to a stage where I think most of e-commerce companies are able to deliver within a couple of hours, right? So I think what's now starting to happen is now we're getting these inbounds from, let's say, someone who's making dosa batter to a curd to a Baskin Robbins to, let's say, a pizza guy. Forget that. I think we're now getting to a stage where the hyper-local baker who's well known in your neighborhood is saying, I'm willing to sort of come and load up the inventory in your dark store, right? Why don't you just sort of bunch this together and deliver my cake, my branded cake, alongside onions and tomatoes and potatoes, right? So I think that obviously opens up a whole range of possibilities, because you're going to have, for that hyper-local baker, right? He wasn't spending on Google ads, he wasn't spending on Facebook, right? If we're going to maybe charge him a buck, right, for getting a cake out that can potentially sell at $50, I think it's probably going to happen within the next couple of years or so.
I think the slide which we sort of perhaps saw, the last slide, in terms of marrying a lot of the offsite data to real-time sort of what's really happening. I'm just taking on from what Vardha just said. So imagine someone's finished eating dosa, is still probably on, just squirming up on some app, trying to look for what he wants to buy in the evening. and he gets immediately, within nanoseconds, an offer of, 1+1 ice cream or something or whatever. So these are things which I think in every category is going to be, I think, game changers, because I think sometimes in the discussions we've had this morning with even with Unilever was that I think it's all about how much data we're leaving sort of for brands to make decisions basis all our digital platforms, right? And in a world which I think we're moving to, which is going to be without cookies and therefore without so much otherwise that planners thought about as well, this is going to be, I think, in a lot of ways, I think game changing for, I think, the way classically media planners have done campaigns. So it's just changing the entire, I think, foundation perhaps. So I think, yes, I'm sure, Anushri, you're going to be still saying that, yes, you want ROAS and you want double ROAS and maybe different terms to that as well. But I don't know whether you'd probably pivot to the element of also, I think, when you sort of get into that whole space of social commerce, personalization of ads within that, what are the different other matrix? Meaning, imagine you're sort of going to get the ice cream, perhaps in some manner that your daughter is speaking to you in some manner because you've got her voice recorded through some video format and that's actually being played out, and you're actually even seeing her talking to you through the ad. That's beautiful, right? Imagine the mother sort of getting her daughter talk to her in that little ad which is coming up there, and she didn't even know that she's seeing her daughter on screen suddenly. Now, that's, I think, game changing, and that's not going to happen later in 5 years. It's now and happening today.
Yeah, agree. And I'm just getting the red light flash saying that our time's up. But maybe what we do is just go around the panel and taking into account that the statistic that I showed in that slides deck before, that retail media in the US alone is going to reach kind of like $50 billion next year. What each of the panelists, what do you feel the next big trend is going to be in these areas?
I think from an advertiser's perspective, and I think what Kushal just touched upon, is really relevant contextual content which is hyper-personalized, hyper-localized, vernacular. I think the session before this actually spoke about the importance of the same. I think marketers are actually veering towards making content matter, and I think good content never went out of style. And we know for a fact that digital effectiveness or efficiency of digital advertising is to a large extent dependent on the content formats, the delivery of messaging, how relevant, how problem solving it is. So I think a combined solution or a more consolidated solution which uses in-market segments or shoppable segments, as we call it, along with the most relevant creative formats, and off-the-shelf solutions like that, which actually work on a particular brief or a business problem. I think that's where we are kind of going towards, and that's what probably marketers would seek, because attribution is still, is probably the largest question to answer. So yeah, that's where we are at.
Just to add to that, I think she covered most of that in lucid detail. I think one of the things that most e-commerce companies struggle with is, I can probably express this better as a metaphor. I think we sort of the guys, we sort of the cricket nets in which folks come and practice. We know exactly who's playing cricket, how many runs they're scoring. Only we just don't know what brand of clothing they're wearing, whether they're wearing a Nike shoe or an Adidas. So we sort of going back, right, all the way from the nets and saying, where does this person live? What does he watch? Does he watch IPL? Does he watch, does he wear a Nike, etc., etc.? Whereas it seems like the rest of the world has exactly the opposite problem, right? They all come back to you and say, hey, this fellow is watching IPL, right? Is this fellow going to be interested in buying, I don't know what, is he going to be interested in playing cricket or what have you, right? I think one of the things that sort of we're consciously trying is, how do we juxtapose the data that we have about who's bought broccolis on our platform to sort of do a Pointillian sketch as to who that person is. I can't quite see that person, but I have his credit card details, right? I have his address. I know what he's shopping. I know how big his or her wallet is. But tell me a little more psychographically about what that person does. What does that person do, etc., etc. To us, I think if we can solve that, right, that will liberate a lot of inventory. Where I'm sort of going with this is, if then I'd probably be able to do a full sketch of that person, and then go to that person exactly where he or she is spending time on. Right at this point of time, I am sort of the end point for that train. I need to know where that train is. Is going to be upstream. What all stations it's going to sort of stop at.
I think we've got great insights from a marketer. We've got a platform. I think when advertising needs to get stitched, we shouldn't see it as an ad. I think the role is going to become more difficult for the creative agencies who've been spending so much of criminal amount of money creating emotional long format advertising, right? So how do you bring that into e-commerce? I think it's going to be a big game changer as well, right? Because we're so used to, and I think we've got Piyush speaking this evening as well. He's used to making a 1-minute film. That's the brief everyone gives Ogilvy, right? Suddenly you change that to make it personalized. You say, you know what, now you want Anushri's daughter in that film. Ogilvy will say, really? Is that a question that our industry needs to sort of think through as well, in terms of how are we going to change that narrative? That advertising also needs to weave in for the platform owner and the marketer's need, and most importantly, it should not look like advertising at all in your face.
I completely agree. I think, and just leading into what you're saying as well, it's just like, how do we actually kind of like stitch together that that offline world into that online world, and kind of like feed both of those funnels, because in the end that's going to it's going to benefit the consumer. It's going to back to what Kushal's saying, it's not going to be in your face advertising. It's going to be hyper personalized, hyper contextual. Okay, how do we and really kind of like focusing in on that kind of like dynamic content, okay, where it doesn't look like advertising. It just looks like that was for me. Okay, and I think when we get to that world, okay, as Kushal said, that's when it's a real game changer.
I always have this theory that obviously most of you guys will be watching Netflix, right? When you open Netflix on your profile, it recommends something, right? Is that advertising or a nudge, right? And I mean, it's obviously a philosophical sort of question, right? And I think my sense is e-commerce will probably get to that place where you aren't quite sure if this is going to be paid for, if it is organic, or it's a cross of all of this. So we'll probably get there in a couple of years.
Cool. And look, just wanted to say thank you to all of you for participating, and some really insightful discussions. Even at lunch, we were having some pretty my propeller was going quite fast. As you can tell, it's a passion of mine. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you to all of our speakers as well. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I won't be able to accommodate the Q&A round for now, but I want to request our members of the audience to please connect with our speakers offline as well.